The one I would say is, at the end of the day, patient outcome is the thing that drives all of us to do what we are doing here. One of the most important benefits that we see is in surfacing patients for early stage, late stage clinical trials, which is still an extremely difficult thing to do. The second part, when these companion diagnostics are approved and fully utilized in the market, I think that is the ultimate benefit because you are able to then recommend a treatment that is more personal for the patient. That is the overall goal. That is bound to happen. And
Right.
we have FDA approved solutions, FDA approved companion diagnostics, AI driven companion diagnostics, I must say. But I would say in the beginning part, the value is all in terms of accelerating the trials, making sure that multiple patients are able to be enrolled in those trials.
Welcome to the People of Pathology podcast. I'm Dennis Strank. On this podcast, we explore pathology one story at a time and connect with the people behind the diagnosis. For years, digital pathology has been about efficiency, reading cases faster, sending images more easily, and doing more with less. Today, my guests are Arun Ananth and Tom Gallo from Proscia. We'll be discussing Proscia's Diagnostic Network and how it helps digital and AI-driven pathology become not just a cost saver, but a growth driver. And we'll see how this opens doors to new revenue and even new roles in precision medicine. All right, let's dive in with Arun Ananth and Tom Gallo. We're going to start with you, Arun. And so I'm going to define what we're talking about. So can you tell me what is Proscia's Diagnostic Network?
That's a great question for us to get the ball rolling. This is a global program. So it's a global network of Proscia's customer institutions who are utilizing Concentric for routine primary diagnostic workflow. The genesis for this came in terms of, Proscia for the last decade or so have been serving two different markets. One is the clinical diagnostic institutions who are going digital, but also we started our journey with life sciences, pharma and CRO institutions who are also pursuing drug discovery, companion diagnostics at scale. And the diagnostics network is a program that kind of connects the two worlds together in terms of utilizing the assets that are built by digital pathology, by large scale institutions who are using it day in and day out to provide value for pharma and CROs. It can come in the form of licensing real world data. It can come in the form of generating real world evidence for accelerating the drug discovery process, for accelerating companion diagnostics. But also it can come in the form of providing clinical trial support, either in terms of services, but also surfacing patients for clinical trials, which with digitization, we can do a lot more effectively. So that in a nutshell is our diagnostic network.
Okay, I like this idea because it's not only providing service to patients now, but there's also the collecting of data and the things to serve patients in the future, right?
Yes.
Is that the idea?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think today's digitization can help accelerate the research and discovery. And I think there is a lot of value that is on a daily basis that is generated from digitization, which unfortunately for a lot of labs is a cost, right? In terms of storing the data and keeping it over a long period of time. So I think this is a very sustainable way of using those assets and generating more value into the ecosystem again.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, so Tom, over to you. Now, there was a press release where you described Proscia's Diagnostic Network as reshaping the economics of pathology. I want to get into that. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, sure. Well, the lab is often seen as a cost center, especially when digital pathology is concerned. Our network expands the economic incentives of digitization to go beyond the ability to process more cases due to efficiency gains. Things like reading more cases faster, eliminating slide logistics, improving staff utilization are all great and real gains that are known today, but there's more fruit to bear, like new high margin revenue opportunities. We have laboratory partners that opt into our real world data program, enabling us to package up data ingested into our platform in a compliant way and find matches with other firms in our network that need that data and will pay for it. So it's a win-win for both sides of the network that doesn't just make companies more efficient, it drives revenue. And due to its high margin nature, has a material impact on the bottom line for our partners.
I think one of probably the biggest barrier in utilization of digital pathology has been the cost up until now. So this is a real good way, a real practical way, I think, to get over that hurdle. I'm curious, let's get into what are some of the economic opportunities that are opening up for labs right now, and then also let's talk in the future.
So I'm going to look at this from the lens of biomarker discovery. Let's just take that as one potential use case because one of the things that
Okay.
AI and digital pathology is really enabling institutions to do, or the field to advance forward, is biomarker discovery. I would say it all starts with data as an asset. Data is not an exhaust, but data as an asset. Data is an asset, especially when it combines with real world clinical information, especially when it has the diversity that comes from multiple different institutions across the world that is catering to a different ethnicity of population, different lab practices. There is an inherent diversity that comes from a large network that is building this data as. That data is significantly valuable for biomarker discovery developers in general. That could be a pharma or a CRO, it could be an AI company that is building the next best foundation model, and so on and so forth. That data as an asset is a first important value stream. I'll put this word. That is the most important value stream. And more often than not, the challenges to date have been about collecting data at scale, collecting data at diversity, and more importantly, the thing that is on everybody's mind as we go through this topic, which is collecting data in a secure and compliant way, right? So that is the first problem that we took on to solve and say, okay, we can provide a simpler technology because we have this enterprise platform concentric that serves both these segments. We can actually take on that burden of security, compliance, and also having smart, intelligent way of storing the data and making it much cheaper to store over large periods of time. So that is the data itself, when it is rightfully curated and rightfully collected, provides a lot of value in exposing it to your partner, to your companion diagnostic development partner who is in this journey with you. And I'll put it this way, the data is always owned by the institution, right? The data is always theirs. It is only that they at their will expose the data for leveraging what data can mean for somebody else. And it doesn't stop there. Let's just say, let's go through this pipeline, right? So this companion diagnostic AI development pipeline, if data is shared, data is exposed, the algorithms are built. What do you want to do for accelerating biomarker discovery? I want to validate that algorithm. Where I go to again, I come back to the data again and say, okay, I want to actually validate this algorithm in a real world environment and want to get feedback in terms of what is the performance of the algorithm when it is really put to test in that environment. So evidence generation is a second value pillar I will focus on. Initiatives around evidence generation, which give a more real world taste and a good feedback for this whole development cycle, is improving these algorithms, improving these biomarker discovery applications to a next level that they are ready for deployment from a market perspective. Last but not least, once these algorithms are mature and ready, I would say they need to be actually going through a trials and a validation process, clinical study validation process. And if I just take the full out at the outset and talk about companion diagnostics, which is where the holy grail for the industry is. In order to go through a FDA clearance for a companion diagnostic, you have to follow a PMA process and you need to go through a trial. It has multiple stages of the trials that need to be done. Labs who are digital now can actually leverage not only the platform and the asset that they build, but also their services to be able to participate in these programs and accelerate clinical trials process themselves. They can be the vehicles that are actually executing on the clinical trial with the help of the platform, Proscia's concentric platform that we have built. But also eventually, when these biomarker discovery applications are approved by the FDA, they can also be vehicles for deploying it and utilizing them, serving the patient population. So those are the 4 pillars I would say. Data as an asset is one important pillar. Evidence generation services as another important pillar. 3, participation in clinical trials. And last but not least, utilization of companion diagnostics as well. Because at the end of the day, all of this is done for pathologists to utilize companion diagnostics and recommend a particular treatment eventually for a patient that may serve them better. So that kind of completes the loop. Happy to dive into the details, but that's a little bit of how we look at this world from Proscia's side.
Okay. A couple of sort of follow-up questions to that. Now, I guess the first thing, we're using patient data, and you mentioned this, that data is secure, right? And it's anonymized,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anonymized is a very big word, I'll say. So de-identified in the appropriate parlance,
Right.
HIPAA compliant if it is for the US, and, GDPR from a European point of view. There are local country level laws as well at all points in time when it's to be compliant with all those country level laws. Yeah.
The other thing is, up until now, digital pathology has been, because of the cost, you see it in the larger, the academic medical centers, the research facilities, things like this. And it seems like with something like this, your smaller hospitals could afford it now because they can also monetize the data, right? Is that part of it too?
Absolutely. So the diagnostic network program from our point of view is not doesn't discriminate based on the size of the lab at all. That's the beauty of it, because at the end of the day, our role as Proscia is we are doing an aggregation at a meaningful level, right? Irrespective of the source of the data, we are acting as an enabler that is having smaller labs, bigger labs participate. And we are building this network that helps us to leverage the data that comes from any institution. When a biomarker discovery process happens with a life sciences partner of ours, we're talking about a use case. They don't really care if it comes from lab A, lab B, lab C. To some extent they care because they want to have the diversity. The more the merrier in that sense, because they would like to account for all the real world practical diversities in terms of, this very well. The lab preparations, the slides can look completely different based on how the slides are prepared, but also the patient population that they serve as well. So that really helps in having a larger, diverse network that is serving this particular need. So it puts labs in an equal footing in a way, irrespective of the size, to leverage the potential of this opportunity. Yeah.
And then I guess throughout healthcare, then this puts pathology more kind of in the driver's seat, I guess, as far as patient treatment, because you're talking about things like companion diagnostics and biomarker discovery.
Yeah.
This puts that role back into pathology rather than, I guess, maybe more in oncology or something like that.
100%. I think this is I've personally been in pathology and digital pathology a little more than a decade. One of the things that always was told in my early days when I started learning pathology and digital pathology till today is that pathologists can really truly come at the front and center of decision-making, treatment recommendation by leveraging technologies more and more, especially with molecular pathology taking a much stronger role, if I put it this way, in terms of that particular aspect. Technology is going to help pathologists play a central role. So I definitely see that as a strong possibility. Till date, that was not happening at scale because, first of all, the market was not really digital. Even so today, I would say 10 to 15% of the market is digital, but we are seeing the momentum for digitization much stronger than ever at this point in time. So it really puts the pathologist in a very, very good position in being a central entity from treatment recommendation and decision-making point of view.
Okay. So now with digital pathology isn't just about increasing efficiency. You're talking about increasing revenue. So how could this change, like you just mentioned, rate of adoption? How might that change?
Yeah, it has been, I think, for us, it's been a great journey to witness from close quarters. In the early stages, about 2.5 years back, when we launched this as the first program because of our existing large network, and it was met with apprehension. It was met with apprehension. Is this going to work? Is this going to generate value? How do we need to look at this? Since then, I think it has been a tremendous journey to see the amount of value that we deliver to all our partners in the network. That has completely changed the conversations around digitization. To your point, ROI is return on investment is still a major consideration for going digital, right? When we start the conversation by saying digital pathology is a profit center and not a cost center, now let's talk about it. How that is happening is initially the curiosity with which the discussion starts, but then realizing that labs of their size and scale, irrespective of the size and scale, have realized these benefits, has completely turned around the conversation. I strongly believe over a period of time, reimbursement will become, we're already seeing early shoots of there. But until then, we do need to find financially sustainable ways to adopt technology. That has been the biggest pain of the slow nature of the adoption curve that you're seeing in pathology. So to be able to have the value that today, and we are not talking 3 years down the line, today, you digitize, you start, and you actually realize the value by partnering with pharma or AI development company has completely changed, at least for administrators, CFOs, COOs, how they are taking decisions on digitization. It has also put a different spin on how to go digital, which is a very important part. It has always been kind of understood that it is important to go digital soon and fully. Having partial digitalization and partial analog workflows is more detrimental than otherwise. Even from a lab point of view, you can realize the issues. None of the benefits of digitization come truly, but then you still are spending money for digitization. Now, by accelerating your digital journey and making it as easy as possible to quickly switch on to a cloud platform, go digital, you're able to actually digitize more. And the more you digitize, the more you're opening yourself up for these alternative revenue streams that did not exist a couple of years down the line. Tom probably had a couple of points to add there as well.
So I would just add on to that, and that was great. Just building on that, operators of companies make real decisions based on real economics. So this is a real motivation for digitization to happen. labs can now generate revenue from data that they wouldn't have otherwise, that would have otherwise been sitting on a glass slide, collecting dust, maybe on a shelf somewhere. And this data may have value to a lot of different folks and not just one time. So it has the potential to change the economics for groups that may have been hesitant to digitize in the first place, or accelerate digitization for those that have already taken the leap and gone digital already. So, and then I think further downstream, pathology contains one of the most detailed and direct profiles of diseases like cancer. And life sciences orgs are especially eager to get their hands on this data. It's a really strong opportunity to advance R&D in the industry itself for firms that are developing new therapeutics or developing AI modules that ultimately delivers the punchline here, which is better patient outcomes.
I've thought about this in the past too, where I work, and probably every other hospital that has a pathology department, there are decades and decades of glass slides just sitting on a shelf or something. And there are companies out there that would pay for that data. And it's interesting that it's just kind of sitting there. And now we've got opportunities to, get money for this data, sure, but also advance cancer care and care of other diseases. And so it would benefit patients as well. And it's just kind of sitting there on the shelf.
Yep.
The other thing I wanted to ask you, and I'm kind of mentioned this earlier, but this completely flips the kind of way of thinking about revenue in the lab, because lab's always been a cost and now it's revenue. And do you have any, from the customers you have that are using this, any examples or stories maybe of how they had to talk to the C-suite and go, look, we can start making money for you? And I feel like that'd be such a foreign conversation for them. Do you know what I mean?
It is. In a way, it's kind of funny. In my job, what I do, one of the things that we always almost encounter is, hey, how do I tell this story to the decision makers internally in the institution? And let's step back and look at this. I don't want to lose the forest for the trees. There are lots of benefits of going digital, right? It's a great incentive from a revenue and financial standpoint, but there are lots of absolutely great benefits in going digital, which we have seen. These days, we hear a lot about talent retention, talent attraction. These days, we hear a lot more about work from home, workplace flexibility that digitization is definitely bringing about. We are also hearing about better utilization as well. Large networked environment where it is not always optimal to utilize, be that as it may, there are other benefits on logistics and everything. But still, what we're talking about here is disproportional returns. Disproportional returns always accelerate the flywheel effect from a market point of view. There are tangible proof points based on where we are today already. All of our institutions who are partners of this program have significantly benefited on the bottom line already. The demand is still outpacing the supply at this point in time. I don't believe that will always be the case. It'll plateau at some point in time. But I would say the next 3 to 4 years are an important journey where there is a significant amount of investment that is happening from biomarker discovery in terms of treatment, targeted therapies, as well as precision medicine. Needless to say, just look at the financial quarterly updates and annual updates of all these pharma and life sciences companies, and you have a very clear picture there, right? Where they're investing, what are the therapeutic areas they're investing. Pathology is front and center. It'll be a travesty if the institutions are not fully leveraging and utilizing the investments that are going on from the pharma side. That is one. Second, you asked for tangible examples, Dennis. So there are at least a couple of institutions, what I can actually think at scale, are not only funding the use of software and AI from these alternative revenue streams, but, based on our partnership, as you know, we are a software and AI company. These institutions are actually funding the entire digital program, including scanners, which is a very hefty capital investment, as you know, through these revenue streams, which is a very sustainable way for them to do this. Now think about that for a second. Pretty much in many cases, the trepidation in going digital is this big capital expense that comes in year one with respect to the adoption of the scanners. Software and AI is still an operationalized expense over a long period of time. So that is a huge change and a huge accelerator. Institutions with whom we started the process, who initially said we are looking at an 18 months journey for us to actually make a decision, or even adopt, have done it in 6 months because they say, okay, this is the value that is happening. These are the tangible programs that I can immediately join by going digital. What are we waiting for? Because the question is not about do we go digital or not. The question has always, these days when we interact, is about how do we time it? What are the financial cycles it should be aligning with? Now we're trying to take that question out of the picture, saying, you don't need to really align with your financial cycles if there is a proven return on investment case that you can see and gain confidence from.
This is the People of Pathology podcast with our guests Arun Ananth and Tom Gallo. We'll be right back. Are you a medical student looking to match into pathology residency? Don't miss the Match to Path annual residency application bootcamp. From August 25th through the 29th, you'll get expert guidance, interactive sessions, and mentorship opportunities, all designed to help you stand out in the match. And here's the best part. Attend at least 4 sessions, and you'll qualify for the exclusive mentorship program. The deadline to register is August 23rd. So if you're listening to this episode on release day, that doesn't give you much time. Go register right now. I'm serious. Pause the podcast, go to match2path.com and register now. It's okay. I'll wait. Okay, are you back? Great. You're on your way to leveling up your application. Good luck. Are you thinking about applying to a pathologist assistance program and feeling a little lost? That's why I created the Path to PathA, your PA school application blueprint. This is a step-by-step prep course that gives you everything you need for a strong application. From finding shadowing to writing a standout personal statement to prepping for interviews, this course was made to help you feel informed, confident, and ready. Visit www.thepath2patha.com to join the mailing list. You'll be the first to hear when the course launches. Your path starts here. And now back to Tom Gallo and Arun Ananth on the People of Pathology podcast. Going back to the ability to monetize data, which I guess is kind of their overarching theme for all of this. So let's define that a little bit better. And I'm curious, how quickly does that happen?
Yeah, it's a great question. Digitization at full potential is the best way for institutions to get the value out of the data because, whenever the requests come, the request can be quite pointed. Right? We are kind of zoning in a little bit into data alone. The requests are not around data. To the point I said earlier, they're around evidence generation. They're around clinical trial participation. But almost always, the request that comes in for a participation in a specific program or a project, if I can say, is very point. It is either for a particular disease or a therapeutic area. You're talking about breast biomarkers. You're talking about lung. You're talking about melanoma, your usual suspects. You're talking about bladder cancer, where there is a lot of investment that is going on as well from a mutation-based treatments point of view. So the more exposure you have digitally, the better you are prepared in terms of actually taking advantage and being able to participate in these programs, either having a data, either having your practice in that subspecialty that is digitized, so you can actually contribute by a real-world evidence generation program by probably deploying an algorithm or contributing to more morphological biomarkers that can be extracted from your data. I would say from the time institutions are live with digital pathology, 12 months is definitely a very important criteria. You should be already seeing a couple of projects of participation in that first year from the time you go live. That is what our track record has been so far. Hope to maintain that as we go forward as well. If you're not already participating in a few programs in the first year, it's a challenging story. Right? The demand and what I'm talking about, the demand and supply equation doesn't really pan out there. So far, we've been fortunate to deliver value in the first year. I'm saying not from the signing of the contract, but let's go digital first. Let's say in under 3 or 4 months, you're digital. From that moment, in the first 12 months, you should be able to at least have return on investment. Your financial upsides come to you already by more than a project, which tells you that what you're doing is in the right direction and you're in for more of this flywheel effect as you're digitizing more and more.
That's amazing. That's a huge difference than, from the way it used to be. All right. So getting back to the patient aspect of this. So we talked about companion diagnostics. We talked about the biomarker discovery. Are there other kind of downstream effects for the patient or benefits, I guess, for the patient?
There are a couple of things, right? So one I would say is, at the end of the day, patient outcome is the thing that guides all of us to do what we are doing here. One of the most important benefits that we see is in surfacing patients for early stage, late stage clinical trials, which is still an extremely difficult thing to do. The second part, when these companion diagnostics are approved and fully utilized in the market, I think that is the ultimate benefit because, you are able to then recommend a treatment that is more personal for that patient. That is the overall goal. That is bound to happen.
Right.
And we have FDA-approved solutions, FDA-approved companion diagnostics, AI-driven companion diagnostics, I must say. But I would say the beginning part, the value is all in terms of accelerating the trials, making sure that multiple patients are able to be enrolled in those trials.
Okay. It's a huge benefit.
Yeah.
All right. So we've talked about the benefits of the diagnostic network, benefits to patients, benefits financially. let's flip this around then. What are some maybe potential risks or the barriers on the horizon for labs that are embracing AI and digital pathology?
Yeah. Perhaps a couple of things from a risks point of view. There are always risks that are there. The number one risk is compliance and security. We talked about this a little bit at the beginning of the program, right? It is extremely important for you to have trusted partners in this process. Scrutinizing them, having the right track record, making sure that the privacy and compliance aspects are taken care of is going to be the most important risk. While there is an opportunity out there, it needs to be done in the right way. It takes sometimes years to establish the compliance related aspects. This is something that we have been very particular about and invested quite a bit of time in going through this process. That is quintessential the way we see it. So when institutions are making a partners, I'm pretty sure in the market there will be a time when multiple avenues exist to do these kind of things. That is going to happen. It's going to be a reality. And when that happens, choosing your right partner and making sure that you are investing as institutions, if I put the lens of, looking at it from the institutions who are participating in this program, who is compliant and secure and proven is going to be an important element of the risk. The second thing is, I think there is a risk of overestimating the impact of these programs, right? That is an important element to take care too. There is a financial incentive, there is a financial upside to go digital, and we are very happy and proud to be a part of contributing that. But institutions need to also take into considerations. There is a risk in all of this. Historical track record may not be always the same. One lab's track record may not be always the same for everybody. So we try to make sure that we actually walk through that process and say, okay, let's play the scenarios out. If everything goes according to plan, this is how it would be. If everything goes above plan, nobody is going to ask. But what happens if we are 6 months delayed to realize these benefits? What happens if we are 18 months delayed to realize these benefits? Is this still financially sustainable? Because sometimes, to your point, you ask this question, when can I expect to see the returns? Typically, it has been in a 12-month period. But when this demand-supply equation changes in the market, which not one institution controls, is largely controlled by how the pharma and life sciences markets operate, they slow down because of economic cycles or any other reasons. It is bound to have some impact on the pace of how many of these programs are out there to be a part of and to generate alternative revenue streams. So those two are important risks I would definitely highlight that we will need to be mindful of and have a plan B. For the first one, there's no plan B. Choose the right partner. Really, reputation risks outweigh everything else. Choose the right partner. For the second one, have the right plan B and make sure that we have a realistic plan that is there rather than a more aggressive plan in terms of how the return on investment looks like.
Okay, that makes sense. So, Tom, it's pretty rare that I get to have a CFO on the podcast. In fact, this might be the first time. So, I want to get your point of view on this. So, what advice would you have for a lab that's considering going digital?
Yeah, I appreciate being on this, and thank you for letting one of the bean counters out in their south at the top in the real world. So yeah, advice I would give is really think about the world and where it's going today. I'd never advise someone to go digital just for the sake of going digital. They have to be real reasons to do so, to be sustainable business of the future, to drive our business metrics, and all while providing better patient care. And I think that's hard to do. It's hard for companies to do something like that, where you're constantly worried about, am I losing focus on my core competency? Am I chasing a shiny object that might distract me from what my real strengths are and therefore distract us as a business? And in this case, I don't think that's the case. I think you could stay focused on your business and add value at the same time. So I'd say, for our partners and people engaged in the industry, engage in the ecosystem, listen to podcasts like this, get involved, learn, and don't be afraid to grow.
Okay. That last point, I'd like, especially don't be afraid to grow. And what about maybe don't be afraid of change?
Yeah, that's right.
A good one too.
That's right.
Yeah. Because this would be a lot of change. Because like we said, this kind of reverses a lot of the conversation about revenue
I agree.
Okay. Great. All right. So I want to end with this because I mentioned the press release earlier, and in that it also mentioned there was a 400% increase in daily cases on the Concentric platform over the past year. And I want to talk about this. Like, what do you think are some of the reasons that this has happened?
Yeah, fair enough. So I would say, first of all, to step back, the market is adopting digital pathology at an unprecedented pace today. Without the market growth, everything else is second. So I want to, for what it is worth, put it out there. Especially in the US, I think there are so many institutions that are going through this process. The realization of the impact that digitization can have is very, very high. It's not a question of if, it's a question of how soon or when. and how quickly can I get this done. So that really helps. I'll start there. Having said that, I would say 3 things from our perspective, which has been the hypothesis for us always. Have the right product, right solution is where everything starts. When we hear comments from most of our users, and it's been a material growth for us, growing from about 2.5 million patients to 8 million patients served in a year is a high base from where we started, and we just went 4x from there. And when pathologists typically say it takes minutes to learn, it's highly intuitive. It's a system that I can actually see as a viable replacement to the microscope that I have muscle memory that I've built over decades. That's a satisfying feedback. It did not happen overnight. It took a lot of blood and sweat to get there. But I would say that is an extremely important part of how this transition has happened. That is one. Second, going digital is a transformation shift. So even though institutions may come into it and say, okay, we are very clear we want to go digital, when they go through the implementation, there's a lot of anxiety that we see. So we have put together a transformation program, which includes pathologists, chairs of pathology who are our customers and who have gone through this process. Having somebody, one of your peer, to guide you through the process, make sure that you're actually doing it from a pathologist lens while you're going digital from your microscopes has been a huge benefit for us in terms of keeping that consideration very clearly in mind, that going digital is not always a simple process, and we will need to account for change management and the levels of anxiety across multiple organizations. Last but not least, I'll put it this way, once you're digital, life still doesn't stop. There are constant improvements, there are constant evolutions, and there are constantly new technologies, new applications, new AI solutions that are coming to the fore. While we have a very strong technical standpoint, which is openness and interoperability, I think we support probably the broadest amount of scanners and AI. The fact that we've been able to listen to the customers, come up with quarterly feedback and releases and improvements and functionality is making users feel like more and more involved in using the solution and making this an actual success. Because once you go live, you still need to go 100% live. And 100% live is a very hazy term in digital pathology. And some institutions say we are 100 digital when they're only looking at AP and they're digital. Some institutions say, no, I want to do HemePat. I want to do frozen. I want to do cytology. And it requires a different level of thought process for a lab to be fully digital. And our objective has been very strongly to make sure that we cover all parts of the lab and support them as much as possible in this digital journey.
Okay, that's great vision for the future. This has been a lot of great advice, I think, for labs that are considering going digital and are worried about the financial aspect of that. So I appreciate the time for both of you to come on in and discuss this. So Arun Ananth and Tom Gallo, thank you both very much.
Thank you. Really enjoyed the discussions.
If you're looking for another episode of the People of Pathology podcast to check out after this one, here's a clip from my interview with Juliana Ianni from Proscia as we talk about foundation models and concentric embeddings.
A lot of their time is spent just solving some like really basic problems, except they're not so basic. They take a lot of time to solve. So concentric embeddings is an answer to that. It abstracts away all of these issues and just basically hands users what they want to start building from, which is those clean embeddings, those clean features. How it works is just that users make an API call to concentric embeddings. So they basically just ask for embeddings from whatever set of images they like at whatever image resolution is relevant to their problem. And they can select from a host of foundation models that we have. And then they get back embeddings that they requested that are just ready to use for their downstream use case, which is typically training a simpler model.
You can hear more from Juliana Ianni in episode 192. Okay, big thanks to Arun Ananth and Tom Gallo. Now, one of the big takeaways from this episode is this idea that data isn't just a byproduct of what labs do. It's an asset. Every time a slide is scanned, it's not just creating a digital image for the diagnosis. It's creating information that can be put to work in the future. That data can help train AI, it can be shared with pharmaceutical partners, and it can unlock new information that we don't even know is there. In other words, it's no longer just about getting through the workload. It's about building something bigger that continues to deliver value over time. The other concept I loved was disproportional returns. At first, the benefits of going digital are the obvious ones, most notably faster turnaround time. And that's great. But once the digital foundation is in place, the returns start to multiply. Suddenly, labs can generate new revenue from partnerships, They can validate AI tools in real-world settings, and they can expand into areas like clinical trials and precision medicine. It's the idea that the real payoff doesn't come from the first steps. It comes from what those steps make possible down the road. And that's what excites me about where pathology is heading. For a long time, labs have been seen mostly as cost centers, something to run as efficiently as possible. But with AI and digital pathology, they're becoming growth engines. They're not just serving patients today, they're shaping the future to help the patients of tomorrow. As always, I'll have links in the show notes to everything that we talked about today. Don't forget you can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at People of Path, or just connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you for continuing to share the show with others. Together, let's inspire the next generation of pathologists and laboratory professionals. This show is a member of Health Podcast Network. Thanks for listening. I'm Dennis Strank, and I'll talk to you next time on the People of Pathology podcast.